A rich older woman's obsession with her young lover ends in death. Emma Johnson, a remarkably beautiful 52-year-old woman, made her fortune in the competitive biotech industry. Her company led the way in brain interface technology, and she was known for her sharp mind and strong will. Emma carried herself with the confidence of someone who always achieved her goals, whether in business or personal life. Charles Thomas, 20 years old with his brooding good looks, seemed an odd match for the sophisticated Emma. A college dropout with a tough background, Charles had moved from one low-paying job to another until meeting Emma, which changed his life's direction. Their relationship, though unusual, seemed to provide what they both needed. Emma found companionship to avoid feeling lonely, and Charles gained financial stability and a life of luxury he had never experienced. For almost a year, their arrangement worked well in Riverton's shadows. But as the seasons changed from summer to fall, changes in their relationship led to a series of events that resulted in violence, leaving the community to confront the hidden tensions that had been there all along. Emma's journey to success started in the middle-class suburbs of Boston. Born to a high school chemistry teacher and a librarian, she showed a talent for science from a young age. Emma was deeply interested in the human mind. Her parents saw her potential and worked hard to give her every educational opportunity they could afford. At 16, Emma's life changed dramatically when her science fair project on neurotransmitters caught the attention of a visiting professor from MIT. This professor recognized her talent and mentored her, helping her through advanced studies and into the top-notch neuroscience program at MIT. There, Emma's drive really took off. During her graduate studies, her research on how the brain can change and adapt caught the interest of several biotech startups. By age 25, she had already secured her first patent and was leading a new company focused on brain-computer interfaces. Under her leadership, the company did well, and its stock price shot up as their breakthroughs made news. With each success, Emma became richer and more influential, but she also earned a reputation for being tough and uncompromising. Former colleagues quietly talked about her ability to charm and manipulate, to find people's weaknesses and use them to her advantage. Emma's personal life was filled with brief marriages, all ending because her partners couldn't match her dedication to her work. Her first husband, a fellow researcher she met at MIT, divorced her after 3 years because he felt emotionally neglected. Her second husband, a charming venture capitalist, lasted 5 years until Emma's doubts about his loyalty led to a bitter breakup. After her third divorce at 48 from a younger art dealer who felt she was too controlling, Emma decided to stay away from traditional relationships. Instead, she started spending time with much younger men, drawn to their energy and the straightforward nature of their relationships, which were purely transactional. This lifestyle fit her well, letting her stay in control while meeting her needs for companionship and intimacy. However, as Emma neared her 50s, she began to feel a deep loneliness. This hidden vulnerability made her fall for the charming Charles Thomas and led to destructive jealousy. Charles's early life was very different. He grew up in a small rural town in Pennsylvania, the youngest of 4 children in a family that was always close to poverty. His father, a long-haul trucker who often drank, was rarely home. His mother, overwhelmed and depressed, struggled to keep the family going. From a young age, Charles learned to look after himself. Blessed with good looks and charm, he found he could use these traits to his advantage. In high school, Charles got by with little effort, using his charm to cover up his poor grades and trouble with school rules. Despite his lackluster performance in school, his SAT scores were surprisingly high, suggesting he was smarter than his grades showed. His talent in basketball earned him a scholarship to a small liberal arts college in Philadelphia. But the freedom of college was too much for Charles. Away from his family and high school teachers, he started partying too much. His grades dropped, and by the end of his freshman year, he had lost his scholarship. Too embarrassed to go back home, Charles decided to stay in Philadelphia, moving between low-paying jobs and staying on friends' couches. During this uncertain time, he met Emma while working as a barista in a fancy cafe popular with business people. One rainy Tuesday morning, Emma noticed him. She was drawn to his easy smile and the slight vulnerability that showed through his confident exterior. For Charles, Emma embodied everything he aspired to: sophistication, success, and a life far different from his modest beginnings. Their light flirting soon turned into something deeper. Emma, seeing potential in Charles and wanting to mold him into her ideal partner, made him an offer. She would support him financially and introduce him to her world of luxury and elegance if he would be her exclusive companion. Facing growing debts and limited options, Charles felt he couldn't turn down her offer and accepted it eagerly. Emma invited him to a gallery opening, making it clear it was more than just a casual invite. She picked him up from his simple apartment, bringing a tailored suit that fit him perfectly. At the event, Emma guided Charles, explaining the art and introducing him to her friends as her young protege. For Charles, the evening was thrilling. He easily played the part of the charming, artistic young man, enjoying the positive attention and lively chats with Emma's friends. As the night progressed, their mutual attraction became more obvious, ending with a passionate moment back at Emma's luxurious penthouse. After their intimate moment, Emma presented her offer. She would give Charles a generous monthly allowance, pay for his education if he decided to go back to college, and open doors to opportunities he had only dreamed of. In exchange, she wanted his company, secrecy, and loyalty. Charles, eager to change his life and leave his aimless past behind, quickly agreed. The next few months were exciting for Charles. Emma moved him into the guest house on her large property, replaced his clothes with designer brands, and introduced him to luxurious living. She signed him up for art classes, arranged for a personal trainer to improve his fitness, and taught him about wine tasting and gourmet dining. Emma enjoyed shaping Charles, treating him like a project and a treasured possession. She loved the admiring looks they got at events, proudly showing him off as her handsome young partner. For Charles, the relationship brought stability and thrill. He embraced his new role with zeal, keen to show his value and keep up with the affluent lifestyle he was quickly getting used to. Their romantic life was intense and adventurous, with Emma introducing Charles to new experiences and always in charge, a dynamic that also influenced other parts of their relationship. As summer changed to fall, Emma and Charles found a routine filled with fancy vacations, social gatherings, and cozy nights at home. To others, they seemed like an unusual but content couple. However, under the surface, dependence and obsession were growing, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. The stable relationship between Emma and Charles started to change with the arrival of Aria Thornton, a 20-year-old art history student from the local university. Aria came into their lives quite simply as a part-time guide at the Museum of Modern Art. Charles met her during one of his regular museum visits, a hobby that Emma encouraged to enhance his art knowledge. Aria was leading a tour group, and her love for the art was clear in her lively explanations and deep insights. Charles was captivated by her passion, which was very different from Emma's more calculated enjoyment of art. After the tour, Charles talked to Aria about the exhibits, and they immediately connected, sharing laughs and an obvious bond. For the first time in a long while, Charles felt appreciated for himself, and not just as an addition to Emma. Aria, with her lively style and infectious laughter, was everything Emma wasn't. Where Emma was polished and controlled, Aria was spontaneous and open. Her youth and vibrancy appealed to Charles, reminding him of the friendships he had given up for his life with Emma. In the following weeks, Charles started visiting the museum more often, timing his visits to coincide with Aria's working hours. Their friendship developed quickly as they discovered shared interests in art, music, and philosophy. Aria brought Charles into her world of college parties, independent film showings, and late-night talks at diners that stayed open all night. For Charles, these new experiences with Aria and her friends were refreshing. He began to reconnect with parts of himself that he had neglected during his time with Emma, including his own artistic dreams. Aria encouraged Charles to explore his interest in photography and even gave him an old camera she found at a flea market. As Charles spent more time with Aria, he began to doubt his relationship with Emma. The real connection he felt with Aria highlighted the business-like nature of his relationship with Emma, and this difference became more and more clear. Charles started making excuses to stay away from the estate, his mind often wandering to thoughts of Aria. Unknown to him, Emma noticed his changing behavior and increasing distraction. Her sharp instincts, developed through years in the competitive corporate world, told her something was different. As Charles started pulling away, Emma became even more determined to keep him under her control, setting the stage for a conflict that would end in tragedy. The first signs of trouble were small. Emma saw Charles checking his phone often, his face lighting up with each message. He started spending more time at the museum, claiming a new interest in modern art. Although Emma initially supported this interest, she soon began to feel suspicious. One evening, while getting ready for a charity event, Emma casually asked Charles about his day at the museum. He answered with excitement, talking about a new exhibit. However, it was his mention of Aria, the very knowledgeable guide, that caught Emma's attention. The way Charles's eyes lit up when he talked about Aria alarmed Emma. Determined to find out the truth, Emma started watching Charles more closely. She even put a GPS tracker on his phone, pretending it was for security reasons. Emma hired a private investigator to track Charles during his outings. The reports confirmed her worst fears. Charles was spending a lot of time with a young woman, and their body language showed they were clearly attracted to each other. As evidence of Charles's deepening connection with Aria grew, so did Emma's jealousy. Emma's emotions swung wildly between cold distance and needy desperation, making her moods unpredictable. One moment, she would lavish Charles with expensive gifts, and the next, she would make passive-aggressive remarks and thinly veiled threats. This behavior started to impact her work life too. She lost focus during crucial meetings, snapping at employees over small mistakes. Her assistant noticed Emma was drinking more, often finding empty wine bottles in her office trash. Unable to hold back her suspicions any longer, Emma confronted Charles after he came home late one night. She demanded to know where he had been, accusing him of breaking her trust. Charles, taken by surprise, tried to downplay his relationship with Aria, saying Emma was making too much of it. Their argument escalated quickly, with Emma reminding Charles of everything she had done for him and suggesting he owed her his loyalty. This confrontation was a turning point in their relationship. Feeling trapped and upset by Emma's possessiveness, Charles started pulling away even more. He became cautious about using his phone, avoided mentioning Aria, and made up complex excuses for why he was away. Driven by her increasing paranoia, Emma stepped up her efforts to keep a tight grip on Charles, even insisting on going with him to art events. Emma's possessive behavior was obvious whenever they were together, sending a clear message to anyone who came close. She started surprising Charles with unexpected visits to the museum, always on the lookout for any signs of the young docent Aria, who had caught Charles's attention. As time passed, the emotional gap between Emma and Charles grew larger. Their once passionate moments became routine and filled with resentment. Emma's jealousy turned into an obsession, consuming her thoughts and leading her to extreme measures to keep Charles close. Unknowingly, her possessive nature was driving Charles further away, setting them on a path toward a deadly confrontation. As her jealousy grew, Emma began a strategic effort to control Charles, using manipulation tactics similar to those that had made her successful in business. She aimed to keep Charles financially dependent and cut off from Aria's influence. Emma started by controlling Charles's money. She occasionally stopped his allowance, making up reasons related to her business finances. When Charles voiced his concerns, she would give in, but only after getting promises from him to spend more time with her and commit more deeply. Emotional manipulation became Emma's main tactic. She alternated between showering Charles with love and giving him the silent treatment, which left Charles unsure and unstable. Emma also used subtler methods to isolate Charles from anyone who might support him. Emma started planning trips at the same time Charles had made plans with his friends. She would voice her concerns about his old friends, suggesting they were a bad influence or just using him for his new lifestyle. Slowly, Charles's circle of friends got smaller, making Emma his main source of company and approval. Whenever she felt threatened, Emma would remind Charles of everything she had done for him, presenting her controlling actions as gestures of love and generosity. She would tell him how she had saved him from a poor and unnoticed life, implying that he would be nothing without her. These guilt trips made Charles feel more obligated and indebted to her. As Charles started to distance himself more, Emma's actions became even more desperate. She started faking health problems like stress-induced headaches or fainting spells that conveniently happened when Charles wanted to go out by himself. Her acting was so believable that Charles would often cancel his plans to take care of her. Through her manipulative tactics, Emma aimed to create a situation where Charles felt he needed her, where he gradually lost his independence until staying with her seemed like the only option. However, each manipulative act pushed Charles closer to his limit, building up a resentment that was heading towards a tragic outcome. During a secretive investigation into Charles's past, Emma discovered a secret that she thought would give her ultimate control over him. She found out through her private investigators that Charles had been involved in a car accident in his first year of college. The accident had seriously injured another student, but Charles had fled the scene in a panic. The investigation into the accident had stalled due to a lack of evidence, but now Emma had the crucial information. Armed with this sensitive detail, she planned her moment carefully. After a fierce argument about Charles's frequent absences as he was about to leave, Emma calmly brought up the accident. Charles turned pale and slowly faced her again. Emma coldly laid out the details, showing him police reports. She made it clear she had enough evidence to reopen the case and get Charles in trouble. The threat was clear. If Charles didn't do as she wanted, she would hand over the information to the police. This news broke Charles. The accident had started his troubles in college, and he had carried the guilt for years. He had thought that by leaving his past life behind, he could escape it. Now, Emma had cruelly removed that illusion. She pushed her advantage, giving Charles a choice: fully commit to their relationship, cut off all contact with Arya, and follow her rules strictly, or she would reveal his secret and ruin his life, possibly even getting him jailed. Feeling trapped and desperate, Charles agreed to Emma's demands. He stopped going to the museum, ignored Arya's worried messages, and became almost a prisoner in Emma's luxurious home. Emma felt triumphant, believing she had secured Charles's total loyalty. However, the pressure of the blackmail soon began to affect them both. Charles became withdrawn and sad. His lively personality faded due to the constant stress of living under threat. He mechanically went through the motions of their relationship, but the energy that had initially attracted Emma to him was gone. Emma realized that her victory felt empty. The lively, challenging young man she had fallen for had turned into a passive shell. She swung between feeling guilty for her actions and frustrated at Charles's lack of energy. As weeks went by, the tension at home grew unbearable. Charles's anger was barely hidden, while Emma became increasingly paranoid, convinced that Charles was plotting to undermine her control. The situation was like a ticking time bomb. The spark that ignited everything happened during a seemingly ordinary event. One chilly autumn evening, Emma took Charles to a gallery opening, showing him off to her colleagues like a trophy. As they mingled, Charles saw a familiar face across the room. It was Arya, looking elegant in a vintage dress. Her presence reminded him of the freedom and real connection he had lost. Without waiting for Emma to react, Charles made up an excuse and left the gallery quickly. He walked the streets, his thoughts racing. Seeing Arya rekindled his strong desire for freedom and reminded him of who he used to be. When Charles got back to the estate late at night, Emma was waiting for him, her expression one of icy anger. The argument that followed was unlike any before. Charles, empowered by his renewed desire for freedom and no longer willing to be manipulated, confronted Emma about her controlling ways and blackmail. Emma, feeling her control over Charles slipping, made a desperate final attempt to hold on to him. She reminded him of the evidence she had against him, threatening to ruin his future by exposing his past. She described in vivid detail the disaster that awaited him if he left her. However, her threats only made Charles more determined. In a moment of clear thinking, he realized that no luxurious life with Emma was worth losing his freedom. With surprising calmness, he told Emma he was leaving, no matter what she did. Faced with the reality of losing Charles despite everything, Emma lost control. As Charles turned to leave, she completely broke down. In a fit of rage and desperation, she screamed and attacked him, scratching his face with her nails. Charles, taken by surprise by her sudden violence, stepped back and accidentally knocked over an antique vase, breaking it. The sound of the vase breaking made Emma even more upset. She grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from a bar cart and swung it at Charles, trying to hit him. He managed to dodge it, and the decanter hit the wall instead, breaking and sending glass and expensive scotch everywhere. Charles, seeing how dangerous the situation had become, tried to hold Emma back and calm her down. But Emma was out of control, hitting and kicking him, yelling about betrayal and ungratefulness. In the chaos, they bumped into Emma's prized art collection, knocking down paintings as they struggled. During their fight, Emma grabbed a letter opener from her desk, a sharp and decorative item. She lunged at Charles, aiming for his chest, but he managed to deflect the attack. The blade sliced deeply into his arm, causing blood to spray. Seeing the blood seemed to shock Emma back to reality. She stumbled back, dropping the letter opener from her now limp hands. Charles, clutching his bleeding arm, saw his chance to escape and sprinted towards the door. In a final desperate attempt, Emma grabbed his injured arm, pulling him back with surprising strength. Acting on instinct and adrenaline, Charles pushed her away forcefully. Emma tripped backwards, her heel catching on the rug, and as she fell, her head struck the corner of the heavy marble fireplace with a sickening crack. She crumpled to the floor, a pool of blood spreading from her head. Frozen, Charles struggled to process what had just happened. The room, once filled with chaos, was now deathly quiet. With trembling hands, he checked for a pulse and found none. The realization that Emma was dead hit him hard. His life as he knew it was over. In a daze, he left the house, stepping into the cool night air and leaving behind a scene that would soon be the focus of a sensational investigation. The next morning, the discovery of Emma's body was made by her housekeeper, Elodia Ramirez. Her screams upon finding Emma's lifeless body shattered the quiet morning in Riverton, drawing neighbors and prompting numerous calls to 911. Detective Lydia Blackwell from the Riverton Police Department's Homicide Division arrived at the scene quickly. The opulent living room, now a tableau of violence, showed signs of a fierce struggle. As she walked through, crunching over broken glass, she surveyed the overturned furniture, shattered artifacts, and the trail of blood that led to Emma's body by the fireplace. As crime scene experts examined the house, Detective Blackwell started to put together what happened the night before. Security camera footage showed Charles leaving the house early in the morning, his shirt covered in blood. His quick departure made him the main suspect, and the police immediately issued a nationwide alert for his arrest. As the investigation deepened, a more detailed story unfolded. Interviews with employees and people who knew them showed that Emma and Charles's relationship was very troubled. Many people mentioned hearing them argue frequently and were worried about Charles's increasingly strange behavior. A significant discovery was made when detectives found hidden files of Emma's. These files showed she had been digging into Charles's past and had evidence for blackmail. This suggested that Charles might have acted out of desperation rather than intending to commit murder. Meanwhile, Charles was still missing. There were sightings reported throughout the state, but he kept avoiding capture. The investigation took a turn when Aria Thornton, feeling guilty about her involvement, decided to come forward with important information. She gave the police text messages and voicemails from Charles that showed how Emma's behavior was getting worse and how scared he was becoming. Aria's evidence showed Charles as a victim, manipulated and trapped by Emma's wealth and threats. This new angle led Detective Blackwell to investigate Emma's past more thoroughly, where she found a history of obsessive behavior and accusations of stalking from Emma's past relationships. Forensic evidence at the crime scene started to support Charles's story. The way Emma was injured seemed like it was from an accidental fall, and her defensive wounds indicated she was the one attacking during their last fight. Perhaps the most convincing evidence was found in Emma's digital records. A deep look into her computers showed how much she had been watching Charles, including GPS tracking and videos from hidden cameras in their house. This extreme level of surveillance shocked even the experienced investigators. As more details about the true nature of Emma and Charles's relationship emerged, public opinion began to change. People stopped seeing Charles just as a gold digger and started to understand he was a young man caught in an abusive situation. Initially, he was charged with second-degree murder. However, as more evidence of Emma's controlling and abusive behavior was revealed, there was pressure to reconsider these charges. After a lot of discussion and negotiation with Charles's lawyers, the charge was lowered to manslaughter. The trial lasted for weeks, and after 3 days of discussion, the jury decided Charles was guilty of involuntary manslaughter. This verdict recognized he had a role in Emma's death, but also considered the special circumstances that led to it. The judge, considering Charles had no previous crimes and the unusual situation, sentenced him to 5 years in prison, with the chance of parole after 3 years. The decision received mixed reactions, with some thinking it was too light, while others believed Charles had already endured a lot. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more gripping content. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about Charles's fate? Stay tuned for more captivating stories.